Part 1. We explored the political aspect of UAP disclosure. If the disclosure problem were merely political, we would expect clarity to increase as secrecy weakens. Documents would surface, photographs would leak, materials would be examined. Instead, something stranger happens. The closer we look, the less stable the phenomenon appears. Because UAP are not only reported by modern fighter pilots, they are not confined to radar screens or infrared cameras. Reports stretch backward not decades, but centuries. In medieval Europe, witnesses described luminous beings descending from the sky, angelic visitations, celestial craft, spirits moving between worlds. In the 17th and 18th centuries, tales of fairy encounters were common. Small luminous entities, missing time, altered perception, journeys to strange realms. In the late 1800s, during the Great American Airship Wave, people reported structured craft piloted by mysterious inventors. Then in the mid-20th century, flying saucers appeared, metallic discs, humanoid occupants, advanced propulsion. And today, hypersonic tic-tacs, trans-medium craft, unmanned systems exhibiting performance beyond known physics. The surface details evolve with culture.
When you read the original accounts of angelic contacts, not just admire them in museums like the European museums, of course, we've all seen them, what you find mirrors modern UFO reports, shining aerial phenomena, levitations, apparent telepathic communication. The parallels are striking. This is what the humble position offers, a profound shock. But if you stay open, you'll find yourself in a conversation, one far older and far stranger than you expected.
And when we examine those historical accounts, an unsettling pattern emerges. The form changes, the structure remains. Witnesses across eras report a luminous object, an encounter, a sense of intelligence, altered perception, ambiguity afterward. The phenomenon mirrors expectation. It seems to speak in the language of its time. If this is extraterrestrial visitation, it is unusually adaptive. If it is secret technology, it predates our technology. If it is psychological, it leaves physical traces. This is what researchers have called high strangeness. Events that blend physical anomaly, psychological distortion, symbolic meaning, technological appearance into a single experience. And here is where the disclosure problem widens. Because governments can conceal hardware, but they cannot conceal centuries, they cannot conceal folklore, they cannot classify medieval manuscripts. The high strangeness model suggests that the phenomenon is not simply a machine entering our airspace. It behaves more like a system interacting with culture, a feedback loop.
This is a phenomenon that does exist and we don't understand it, and it may be extraterrestrial, but it's probably something else. When you talk to the witnesses in every country, including the US, what they are telling you is that they have seen something that was there, that was part of their reality, part of their physical reality, and yet was capable of appearing out of nowhere or disappearing into first any new phenomena, even if you go back to the 15th century, when you look at electricity, for example, or electrostatics, as it was observed then but not understood, has the potential of being regarded as magical.
Yes.
I think Arthur Clarke said that any technology that we don't understand has to be magic, has to be perceived as magical. I'm paraphrasing badly what he said. Clearly, here is a phenomenon that is very complex and is showing abilities that we cannot duplicate with our current technology. So it immediately calls to mind magic and occultism.
Yes.
If it also contains something that electrostatics and electromagnetism doesn't contain, the potential of being intelligent. If it is intelligent, then we may not be able to study it with science alone. Science is a way of gaining knowledge based on phenomena that are not manipulated by an intelligence. If now there's an intelligence involved, then it becomes much more complex.
It requires a humanistic approach.
And yes, it requires a much more diverse approach from many different disciplines, and it may be that the people responsible for that manifestation understand the impact that the phenomenon will have on us, on our own imagination. And that's one of the speculations that I proposed, was that perhaps the observations of UFOs were similar to a teaching system.
Now, consider this carefully. If an advanced extraterrestrial civilization were visiting Earth in spacecraft, we would expect certain consistencies: clear material evidence, predictable behavior, stable morphology. Instead, reports show variability, sometimes metallic, sometimes luminous, sometimes mechanical, sometimes biological, sometimes absurd. Absurdity is the key.
Contact between human percipients and the UFO phenomenon always occurs under conditions controlled by the latter. Its characteristic feature is a factor of absurdity that leads to a rejection of the story by the upper layers of the target society and an absorption at a deep unconscious level of the symbols conveyed by the encounter.
1955. In rural Kentucky, a family reported small, metallic, big-eared creatures emerging from the woods and floating toward their farmhouse. The witnesses shot at them repeatedly. The bullets allegedly bounced off with metallic pings. The beings flipped, floated, and peered through windows like cartoonish intruders. The tone of the encounter is strangely theatrical. Tiny armored goblins immune to gunfire, behaving more like mischievous folklore entities than extraterrestrial explorers. 1961, a landed saucer. 3 dark-haired humanoids. No dramatic abduction. Instead, they handed the witness hot pancakes before departing. Laboratory tests confirmed the pancakes were ordinary. The mundane absurdity, cosmic visitors distributing breakfast, makes this one of the most famously surreal cases in UFO history. US Navy pilots aboard the USS Nimitz intercepted a white, tic-tac-shaped object off the coast of California that hovered erratically above a patch of disturbed ocean water, mirrored the pilot's descending spiral as if reacting to his movements, then abruptly accelerated with no visible propulsion, disappearing in seconds and reappearing at the Navy's pre-assigned combat air patrol rendezvous point, suggesting foreknowledge of their classified flight plan.
Fighter pilots describe craft that accelerates beyond physics, but then hovers playfully. Witnesses report entities delivering cryptic messages that dissolve into nonsense. Encounters often contain an element of theater. It is as if the phenomenon performs, not randomly, but in a way that interacts with belief. And this raises a radical possibility. What if the phenomenon is not merely visiting humanity? What if it is participating in human cognition? Some researchers have proposed what is sometimes called a cultural control system hypothesis. Under this model, the phenomenon does not reveal itself fully because ambiguity serves a function. It destabilizes certainty, it provokes inquiry, it adapts to prevailing worldviews. In medieval Europe, it manifested within religious cosmology. In the industrial age, it took mechanical form. In the space age, it appears as advanced aerospace technology. If this model is correct, disclosure becomes a paradox. Because what exactly would be disclosed? A machine? A trickster intelligence? A psychological projection? A trans-dimensional interface? The more adaptive the phenomenon, the less stable it becomes as an object of study. And modern institutions depend on stability. Science requires repeatability, government requires definable threat, media requires narrative clarity, but the phenomenon resists closure. When military pilots report structured craft that suggests hardware, when abductees report telepathic communication and missing time that suggests consciousness involvement, when folklore mirrors modern reports that suggests continuity, and when radar confirms visual sightings that suggests physicality. It is both material and symbolic. That is the strangeness. The secrecy hypothesis assumes a vault. The high strangeness model suggests a mirror. One hides information, the other reflects culture.
I think if you look at people's encounters with flying saucers or UFOs, there's a kind of transcendence there. There's a kind of awe and inspiration there. And by transcendence, I mean they can't really be explained by our social location, by society, or even by nature, which is what science wants to do, by the way. It wants to build a model of the UFO that's based on the mathematics and principles of material science. And I think that's mistaken. I think the saucer appears to human beings as not part of this world, but yet a part of this world. So it appears at a particular moment in time, at a particular crisis point, a transition point, but it also talks about a world that is not society, is not the world, is not the place of the person. And to me, that's the most defining feature of the UFO phenomenon, is that otherness that I don't want to reduce to things we think we understand.
Now imagine you are a policymaker. Imagine classified briefings include not only radar data, but reports that blur psychology and physics. Imagine some cases produce trace evidence, while others dissolve into absurdity. What exactly do you disclose?
President Obama says that there is footage and records of objects in the skies, these unidentified aerial phenomenon, and he says we don't know exactly what they are. What do you think that it is?
I would ask him again. Thank you.
If you confirm hardware, you risk geopolitical panic. If you confirm adaptive intelligence interacting with consciousness, you risk ontological destabilization. Under the high strangeness model, disclosure cannot be clean because the phenomenon itself is not clean. And perhaps this explains something subtle. Governments acknowledge anomalous performance. They avoid speculation about origin. They emphasize safety and national security. They remain silent on experiential accounts. It is easier to discuss propulsion than perception, easier to analyze flight characteristics than metaphysics, because the strangeness layer is destabilizing. Modern society rests on a foundational assumption. Reality is objective, external, and independent of observer belief. But high strangeness cases hint at something else. They suggest interaction. They suggest participation. They suggest that the phenomenon may respond to attention. And this is where the disclosure problem crosses a threshold. Because if the phenomenon adapts to culture, then full disclosure may not end ambiguity. It may intensify it. Public belief could influence manifestation. Media amplification could alter expression. Narrative framing could shape experience. In that case, disclosure becomes dynamic, not an event, but an interaction. And here is the most unsettling implication. If ambiguity is functional, then total clarity may never be permitted. Not by governments, but by the phenomenon itself. That statement may sound speculative, but consider the pattern. For decades, compelling evidence accumulates, yet it stops short of definitive proof. Photographs are grainy, videos are ambiguous, witnesses are credible but isolated. Data suggests anomaly but avoids confirmation. It is as if the system hovers at the edge of revelation, enough to provoke, not enough to conclude. If this is deliberate concealment, it is remarkably precise. If it is structural, it is profoundly strange. The strangeness problem does not invalidate the hardware hypothesis, it complicates it. Because there are physical craft, perhaps some are technological, but the full dataset includes experiences that exceed simple engineering. And if the phenomenon includes both physical and symbolic layers, then disclosure cannot simply release documents. It must address interpretation, which is far more dangerous. Because once interpretation fractures, consensus fractures. And once consensus fractures, institutions weaken. We are accustomed to technological revolutions. The steam engine, the airplane, the nuclear bomb, the internet. Each destabilized society temporarily, but reality itself remains intact. But what if the next revolution challenges the boundary between mind and matter? What if the phenomenon suggests that observer and observed are not fully separable? That possibility pushes us into philosophical territory. And that is where the disclosure problem becomes existential. The secrecy hypothesis asks, what are they hiding? The strangeness problem asks, what if the phenomenon itself resists being known? And if that is true, disclosure is not obstructed by classified vaults. It is constrained by the architecture of reality. In part 3, we examine the most destabilizing possibility of all, that consciousness is not merely observing the phenomenon, but participating in it. And if that is the case, disclosure is no longer about governments. It is about the nature of existence itself.